Isn't that we don't trust you, it's that if you need a transcript, we'd be very happy to provide.
Very good. Well, I will need that. Sure.
I'm going to bring Ken Tomlinson down with him, sir, the head of VOA, who is now at the Reader's Digest in Pleasantville. You had him, remember Ken?
Yes.
Yeah. And then our editor-in-chief thought that might be more effective just one-on-one, so Ken deferred to me.
I remember an interview once I had there at your, have you ever seen their headquarters?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's a kind of a beautiful country home, out spacious lawns and
It
so
is
forth.
indeed. And the president absolutely captivated DeWitt Wallace, our founder, for about 4.5 hours, and then you finally had to leave to go make a speech, but it was a memorable lunch. What we would like to do here, sir, is to ask you some questions so that our readers here and abroad, about 100 million of them, can have a better idea of President Reagan the man. And I'd like to start off by asking what has surprised you the most, pleasantly and unpleasantly, about being inside the government that you've had for so long observed from the outside?
Well, first of all, I guess one surprise, and whether pleasant or unpleasant, was at how little I was surprised. Because the 8 years as governor of California, I realized when I came in here, suddenly it wasn't a great shock as becoming governor had been, but the discovery of the kind of the routine, the scheduling, all of that, and while there was added the international situation, the rest was, as I say, not too shocking. There was, however, there was a surprise having to do with being the commander-in-chief and things of that kind. One part of it that shocked me a little bit was the first time, only weeks after we were here, that Jack Kilpatrick invited us down to a Sunday lunch at his house, and the helicopter picked us up here in the lawn, and very shortly we landed there at his farm, and he told me that they'd been there for several days installing the phones. And I said, what do you mean, installing the phones? And that was when I found out that I can't even go across town to a lunch or a private dinner without phones are installed. And it was explained to me, well, Jack explained it that as they had explained it to him, that wherever I was, I had to have the ability to communicate any place in the world. And in telling him this, they told him that they could reach anyone for me, and he challenged them on that. And they said, name someone. Now, Jack is telling me all this. And he named a son of his who was on embassy guard in a country in Africa. And they got him on the phone, and he and his wife got to talk to their son. So they asked him, wasn't anyone else? And he said he had another son who was a quartermaster on the USS Pratt, a destroyer out in the 6th Fleet, the Mediterranean. And when he said, well, can you get him? And they said, no. Well, he said, you said you could get anyone. Well, they said, no, the fleet is on maneuvers. And the only one who can get the fleet when it's on maneuvers is the president. So Jack was telling me all this. When we got there, when we got in the house, I met the young man's wife, a very sweet young lady. Hadn't seen her husband for months. And I excused myself and went back out, and I said, is this right that I could get someone in the USS Pratt in the 6th Fleet? And they said, oh, yes, sir. And I said, well, get Quartermaster Kilpatrick. And I went back in and got her. Well, she got to talk to her husband, whom she hadn't seen, as I say, for all those months. And I didn't realize what I'd done. It was a surprise to find out that what just a few words from me, I have to think a little better, because I got a letter from Quartermaster Kilpatrick, and he told me that I would be surprised what air traffic was like. I hadn't even thought it through, that the last portion of that call would be by radio. And he said that that the air was admirals talking to admirals, and ships talking to ships constantly, all of this. And then a voice on the air said, White House calling. And another voice said, "What code is that?" And another voice said, "Maybe it's no code, maybe it's the White House." And he said, "Even Hollywood could not have silenced the air as quickly as it was silenced." Then he said they came down and got a lowly quartermaster on a destroyer to come to the phone. And he wrote this line, which I'll never forget. He said, "It was as if God had called the Vatican and asked for an altar boy by name."
That's great. Making that call was obviously not the toughest decision you've had to make. What has been the toughest decision in the 4.5 years?
Well, there are a lot of the tough decisions, the ones in which there's so much right on both sides. I make the cabinet go over and over these things in front of me there, and I hear, because when there's differences of opinion because of the split between right and wrong, and when I've heard enough, I make the decision. I've always used the cabinet, as I did as governor, as a kind of a board of directors, except for one thing: they don't vote. I have to make the decision. But I think the hardest ones will always be those instances where you have to, or you order our young men in uniform to go someplace where their lives will be endangered. That is, without doubt, the most difficult.
When you became president, you didn't have any foreign policy experience. Has your view of the world changed in the 4.5 years?
Well, I have to tell you that the premise is a little wrong. Not that I had been a diplomat in any way, except that, again, having been governor of California, while it didn't have a foreign policy, if California were a nation, it would be the 7th ranking economic power in the world. So you had some interest in, and it is, I guess, the biggest percentage of trade in and out of our country is by way of California. But it wasn't that. I had always had an interest in international affairs, particularly because of the Soviet Union, and when I was president of the Screen Actors Guild, the effort of the communists to move in on the motion picture industry. And all I can tell you is that when I was running for governor, some of the press editorialized that if I didn't stop talking about international affairs, I'd never become governor. And, but I did have that interest. And then, as governor, 4 times the president asked me to do some missions and errands for him abroad that took me to 18 different countries in the world, and some of them several times, more than once. And so that has always been an interest of mine, and there wasn't much that had to be changed in my opinion about the good guys and the bad guys and what our responsibility was.